If you don't notice, this is the first time we've done something with this many cameras and stuff. Well, it's technically the second time, so we're kind of testing some new stuff. This is our first Spotlight. Normally we do 3 or so businesses, entrepreneurs, individuals, whoever has built something interesting and new, and they demo it at one of these meetups, or we do a full hour on a technology topic. We've done some of those recently on things like Docker, the agile process for software development, things like that. This is our first panel-style meetup, and I think you'll really enjoy it. The panelists we have tonight have all started and run and worked with successful businesses in the Lehigh Valley. And if you are watching the live stream, which you very well may be, I don't know, but if you're watching the live stream, feel free to ask any questions with the hashtag LVTech. I'll be keeping an eye on that as well as we go through the evening. And if you're also here in the room, go ahead and use those so I can see them, and we'll ask them as well. And at the end, if you don't have a phone or you don't have Twitter, you don't have any of those things, we'll open up the room to some questions as well. But I'm going to start by introducing the panelists. First, we have Rita. Rita was the winner. Her team was the winner of the first startup weekend. And I'll also remind the panelists, you have to hit the, there you go, and we can hear you. So Rita was the winner of the first startup weekend that we had here in the Lehigh Valley, and she has it was wrong originally, it's now Skaffl is the actual company, right?
Yes.
Is that also the product name?
That is also the product name.
That's also the
we
product
simplified.
Name? So tell us a little bit, just briefly, what the product does, what the company does.
Sure. So Skaffl is an application for iPads at this point only that allows teachers and students to distribute and collect assignments in classrooms that have iPads for both students and teachers. It's a growing use of mobile devices across the country and across the world. So we're solving the problem for teachers and students and simplifying that workflow.
All right. And we have Phil. Phil has, he's a consultant who's consulted with CIOs across the country and also worked with Computer Aid a few years back and still consults with them now. Phil, tell us about what you did at Computer Aid and a brief mention of your new book.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Weinzimer, so I'm president of my own consulting company called Strategere Consulting, and working with clients to help them achieve significant business outcomes with developing IT and business strategies. I just completed a book that just came out a week ago. That's why I'm smiling. It's called The Strategic CIO, Changing the Dynamics of the Business Enterprise. The forwards are written by two prominent CIOs, Filippo Passerini from Procter & Gamble and Rob Carter from FedEx. And it's all about how strategic CIOs transform their organization to become a strategic asset. I've worked at Computer Aid, that's headquartered in Allentown, worldwide headquarters. I had started a strategic consulting business for them, and then moved on to a startup out in California that got bought by BMC Software. Some of you may know BMC, Remedy, Help Desk. That's their core stuff. And I'm pleased to be here and hopefully add some value to the discussion.
All right, we have Pat, and I'll get the mic working here in a second. I'm also looking at that as we ask the questions. Pat founded Ecotech, was one of the, 4 or so individuals that founded Ecotech Marine, and now still in the Valley builds some very interesting and unique aquarium products. Pat, tell us a little bit about what Ecotech does.
Hi, so back in 2003, I joined 2 guys to form Ecotech Marine, and we manufacture high quality pumps and lights for the saltwater aquarium industry. So that's a saltwater fish tank where you grow corals, and corals need the right type of light spectrum and the right type of flow in order to flourish within an aquarium. So we were hobbyists ourselves, and we saw opportunities because we understood the problems of a reef aquarist. And we decided to manufacture products that would improve upon the existing technologies. We came up with a product called the Vortec pump, which was different enough because it magnetically coupled through the aquarium glass, and it was that innovation that helped us to sell a lot of those pumps and manufacture that for almost 10 years now. Now we've been building Radeon lights and a control platform that's cloud-based, and you can use an iPhone or an Android device or an iPad to control your aquarium regardless of your location. And we since merged with our largest competitor in the US. Now we have a manufacturing facility in Allentown, one in Ames, Iowa, and we have satellite sales and service offices in Hong Kong, and we're setting one up in Toronto next month. So we've been growing, and we plan to continue to grow and diversify outside of our particular industry, and we're planning to do it wisely, one step at a time. It's not our first foray outside of reef aquariums, but we do feel like we have some opportunities to diversify the business and to continue our growth.
And finally, Dev, who is the founder and CEO of INetU, a hosting company that is headquartered in the Valley and has been for the past 17 or almost 18 years. So Dev, tell us a little bit about what INetU does specifically.
Thank you, Tim. My name's Dave Chanchani, and I was a Lehigh student when I wrote a business plan for a hosting company in 1994. And I dropped out of Lehigh to start that company. INetU got started in 1996, and we provide hosting services and cloud computing for business clients around the world. So we provide services to great companies like BMW and Sony in the United Nations, and really differentiate our business on our approach to service and security, both where we think that we're leaders in the industry and have a whole bunch of great people who help our clients.
All right, now I just have one question for everybody. Going from Dev, we'll work down from there. Give me one thing you're really proud of that you've accomplished professionally, and then also one failure briefly that you learned a lot from.
So that's a great question. I'll start with the failure. So I think that a failure that personally helped shape the business was in the tech wreck, if everyone remembers, of sort of the year 2000, of a company that just had its foot on the gas way too hard and had the markets fall out underneath of us. We had raised 2 rounds of angel funding totaling about $2 million, and we're really accelerating. So in those years, growing between 100% and 400% per year. And when the markets fell out from underneath of us, we had to lay off a little over a third of the company and exit 2 out of the 3 lines of our business. And, I've tried to run the business in such a way to never have that happen again. So in the recession of sort of 2008 and 2009, we didn't lay off a single person and continued to invest in the business through those years, and really thought that those were some great years to make investments in the business. And, I guess that may be something I'm really proud of, is the ability to keep investing in a difficult market, just because we had remembered those more challenging times and stayed disciplined.
All right, thanks. Pat?
So I guess I'll start off with my mistake. Was that it?
Yeah, well, one that you learned something.
That we would learn something from, yes. So there's lots of them. There's so many to choose from. It's hard. I think
You're
that
only 30 what?
32 now. So of the plethora of mistakes that I've made, I think that most recently we introduced a product that we thought was going to be very popular. It was part of our platform that would allow our wireless devices to be controlled via the internet, and it was called the ReefLink. And we still sell it, but we don't make a damn dollar selling that. We actually probably break even and lose money. But we were thinking, everybody's going to want to buy this product so that they can connect all of their devices to the internet. And the reality of the situation was not what we had imagined. So our mistake was making an assumption of what the customer wants when that assumption was wrong, and placing big bets. Now, looking back on it, we could have reduced the incoming inventory, we could have designed it a little bit differently, but we were doing the best with the best information we had at the time, using history as an indicator of the future. But as I'm sure stock investors and other people will tell you, history is a very bad indicator of the future. And so, that has given myself and my business partners a lot of understanding and caution in our ventures, and to really protect what we have by making wise decisions and measured steps, not to shoot for the moon, so to speak. In terms of something that I'm proud of and something that we've done very well building a strong team. And, it's impossible for you as a founder, anyone sitting up here at this table, to run an entire business. And the thousands of decisions, of little decisions that happen every day, are a result of how well your team understands what you and the group is trying to do, and how much in alignment they are with each other and, the goals of the company. And is your team as highly skilled as you need them to be? Because as a U.S. business, as an American business, we have to be operating at 110% of our game in order to compete with the rest of the world these days. So, from my standpoint, we've been able to build a successful team and continue to grow the core of that team.
Thanks, Phil.
So I'll start with success, and I'll talk about the failure later. You'll understand why. So I'm a little different than my panelist colleagues. So my success is sort of reinventing myself when I decided to retire. and it was writing the book, and I write articles, and I write for CIO.com, and I do interviews with IT thought leaders, and I travel around the country speaking about strategic CIOs and how companies need to evolve and be more competitive. And that has all happened like in the last 2.5 years. The sort of the lesson learned there is you can do anything you want, no matter what the obstacle is, as long as you set out and sort of create a plan for it and just manage it just like a project. So that's what I'm proud of. My failure is keeping my wife out of outlet stores, trying to keep her out of outlet stores, but it doesn't work. And I try really hard, but she's really a good shopper. But seriously, I think in terms of a failure, happened a couple of times, but the one that's most significant is I had an opportunity back in 1990. I don't know if any of you were around then at Lehigh with Roger Nagel and the Agility Forum.
I knew Roger well.
Okay, and so I'm friends with Roger, and I was part of the Agility Forum. I had an opportunity to join them, and I sort of stepped back and I said, I don't think I can add value to the group of business people that were in there, and I said no. So the lesson here is never say no. So I went back home, thought about it at night, and I sort of kicked myself in the head and said, dummy, never say no. I called Roger the next day and said yes, and that led to a whole host of other successes. So the failure was saying no. So the lesson learned is never say no for any opportunity. Just figure out how to leverage it and make yourself successful.
All right, Rita.
All right, so our company has probably been around the least time of everybody up here, so our successes and our failures so far haven't been as great on either side of the spectrum. I'm hoping they continue to lean towards the successes. So I'll say the failure at first, I think, was we started the company. It was my idea. I was a teacher in a school district, and I didn't have experience running a tech company at all. I just had an idea and a problem that I knew needed solving, and came to Startup Weekend and was able to get a team together, and then it created a momentum that felt like a sprint. And so you get very excited and you start thinking that your success is going to be like next week or 2 weeks from now or a month from now. And so you're running very fast and you're over-promising, yes, we'll get that done, and, and not quite the understanding of how long it takes to actually develop a really good core product. And having a CTO who is just fantastically amazing and doesn't like telling me that he can't build it in 2 weeks. And so I think that was some of our failures in the beginning, was just trying to figure out this isn't a sprint, it's a long distance marathon, and that we need to slow down and really make sure that we don't, you can hype it up, you can build it up if you're really excited about what you're building, but then you really got to sit down and build it the right way, both business-wise and product-wise. So from that, the sort of early small failures in terms of ourselves, where we were disappointed, where we would schedule something for an event and wouldn't be quite as prepared as we wanted to be when we showed up for that conference. The product wasn't quite there. We learned to take a step back and realize that it takes time to develop a great product. And from that were some of our biggest successes, because we really took the time to then go out, talk to teachers even more, be flexible, realize that even though it comes from our own experience, we're not the only users, really get to know other users out there. And so I think our greatest success has been so far now when we go to a conference, we are prepared because we make sure that we're going to have the product ready that we've promised people when we get there. And the success is when we talk to teachers and they get excited about it, and they get, they're thrilled that somebody's creating something that they've always wanted, and almost didn't even know that they wanted it this badly, but they felt that they needed it when they see it, the excitement in their eyes. So that's the success comes, I think, even from that original failure, which I think is the best part about failures, is when you can turn them around into a success. So.
Now, we're going to switch gears just a little bit and talk now specifically about the Lehigh Valley and technology, having a business, working with a business, what it's like to do that in the Valley. Pat, I want to talk to you a bit. You just mentioned that you merged with one of your competitors. What's it been like for Ecotech, going from 4 people to however many you have now? I'm sure there's been physical changes in locations, buildings, facilities, growing the company itself. In the Lehigh Valley, what was that process like? What's it going to be like for somebody who's, like Rita, has started a business and may now need to expand as they grow? What's your experience been like for the Valley? What's good, what's bad, what could be better?
So growing a company here has had a lot of wonderful things. There's a lot of great places, Ben Franklin, case in point, the Pi Center, there's the Bridgeworks in Allentown. There's co-working space. There's a lot of options for someone starting out as a founder or starting a new business, and to grow. So starting out, it's not very too expensive. You can find talented people. There's all these wonderful things. I'm sure LVEDC could go on for entire hours and tell you why it's so awesome to work here, or be here. But so there were challenges as well for us. And as a manufacturing firm in Pennsylvania, we have needs that include space and talent and supply chain, shipping, all these wonderful things. And once we grew out of our college apartment, we moved to a firehouse. And then that got small, and we had, 30 people in, 4,000 square feet and sharing one bathroom. And then we couldn't find anywhere in the south side that fit our needs, so we had to pick up and go somewhere else. But we were able to find space, and we were able to make it happen. However, there is not, it's not always easy to find, and the decisions aren't always easy, because you can make the wrong decision. You can bite off more than you can chew, and you can try to grow too fast. So that's been my experience here in Bethlehem. Now, we did merge and kind of bought out with a stock purchase another company. And so they have a headquarters in Iowa. Now we have the wonderful question of, well, now we have 2 facilities. One's 26,000 square feet, one's 36,000 square feet. Do we want to merge them together? Do we want to keep them separate? And there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions unanswered even now about that. And on top of that, you're merging 2 different companies with different cultures, different people, different backgrounds. Do they match or do they not? And we've been able to develop a kind of culture in each location, which has its own identity, but also is now part of a larger identity. And that's our challenge, to be able to kind of nurture that without killing it. Because by allowing the different groups to operate with slightly different rules and different ways of doing business, we give them the freedom to be accountable for their own jobs and their own products and all these things. So there are plenty of challenges with regards to where you put your business, and the best path is usually going to be keeping your overhead low.
Deb, on that topic, as INetU expanded, what was it like? I'm sure you went from one facility to the next, or had to find a way to grow the business over 17 years. What was that like in the Valley?
We were actually really lucky in that we've been at our same location ever since we started the company. So we started in Lehigh Valley Industrial Park number 3 with 1,000 square feet. And one of the things that's really been great in growing a business in the Lehigh Valley is really the quality of the people. There have been times in growing the business where I might have wished that we were on the West Coast, but I think when I look back at the totality of the experience, we're really fortunate that we were right here in the Lehigh Valley, because for us, in 1,000 ways, the integrity and the quality of the people have made so many differences that I can't even count. So, for example, we were in a Liberty Property Trust building with 1,000 square feet in a 50,000 square foot building. We had our neighbors relocate unplanned when we approached them 5 times so that we could pick up additional space. And those 5 moves that our neighbors made, 3 of those moves were actually one neighbor that moved for us 3 times so that we could take the adjoining suite. And, I can't tell you how fortunate our business was, because building data centers and installing generators and building our server farms requires an awful lot of investment into our facility. And to have neighbors that you don't even really know and you just approach them and say, hey, I know your business is doing well and you don't need another problem, but would you mind moving because we kind of really need your space? And on 100% of the time, the answer was no problem. If you're willing to pay our moving expenses, you got it. And I can't even tell you how fortunate we were. And in 2010, we actually were able to buy the building from Liberty Property Trust as they began to pull out of the Lehigh Valley. So now we own that facility where we started, and I can't tell you that. I mean, if we were in another place other than the Lehigh Valley, I can promise you that 5 times the answer would not have been sure, no problem. And, in our experience, the Lehigh Valley adds a lot to growing a business because of reasons like that.
All right, Rita, when you first had an idea, and I know it was bouncing around in your head for a while because you saw the problem that you were experiencing as an educator, where did you first turn to think, like, is this possible? What do I do? What are the first steps? Where did you turn? What resources were available to you? And what were your first thoughts, just as you're saying, well, this could be a product, this could be a business?
Right, so initially, we actually reached out a little bit beyond the Lehigh Valley, just because my first thought was to reach out to my personal network on Facebook. I knew I had a friend who lived in Philly who worked in tech and hadn't talked to since middle school. So he got a strange message from me one day. But he introduced me to the idea of meetups and to what he did, and we started going to Cocoa Head meetings to try to find an iOS developer down in Philly, and went to an awful lot of meetings, and was very lucky that the Meetup app itself will recommend other meetings to you. And recommended one here that wasn't an hour drive down to Philadelphia. And where, honestly, I have to say, the welcome at the Lehigh Valley one was so much warmer than in Philly. Perhaps there's, more resources, but they're harder to get a hold of in that area. So as soon as we came up here, I think Anthony was the first person who we met when we walked in the door of that meetup. And that was really when things started to roll, and then we found out about the startup weekend and a whole bunch of other people. And even before that, we learned about Ben Franklin and really the resources here. And that's sort of how the whole story goes, is that linking. And I do have to say that, maybe there was a point where we went up to Boston for an accelerator for 4 months. And that was particularly because we're ed tech, and ed tech is very specific. And there really aren't that many other ed tech companies in the Valley. So that's a bit of a handicap that we have here. But when it comes to the network in general, it's so much more welcoming here than it is in the larger cities. And we've had the resources. We hired an iOS developer locally. We didn't have any problems when we put out that application. And I know some of our cohort up in Boston who are hiring for the same position in a large city had a much harder time hiring somebody, even though you'd think here's this large pool, they're in Boston, they've got all these great universities, and they can't find anybody. They couldn't find interns. We got an amazing student intern out of Lehigh. We were actually even able to get a grant in order to pay for our student. I mean, all of these things that our cohort who stayed in Boston is actually very jealous because we had really great early stage support. So, and that's the one thing I have to say about around here is that there's this ability to get the really early stage support for your company is just unmatched.
Now, after all this, now that you've gone through the process so far, is there anything that you didn't know about then that for someone who has an idea, you would encourage them to find out more about, to make sure they take advantage of, if they're in the same position you were 2.5, 3 years ago?
I mean, I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know any of this was here, to be honest. I didn't realize that there was Ben Franklin. I didn't realize that there was a, Lehigh Valley development. I didn't know that Allentown had one as well. I think it's just a matter of start talking to people if you have an idea, and you'll find those connections. And particularly in a smaller city area like Bethlehem and Allentown and Easton, you just have a much better ability to reach out to those connections. So I would just say to anybody who has an idea, just don't be afraid to reach out, because the number one thing is connections. I was surprised. I was a mentor at this week's startup weekend, and I think the one thing that I help teams most with is the idea of, I had my Rolodex of people, and they were random people. I knew a guidance counselor, and that was very helpful to one of the teams. And so you never know until you have that conversation who can help you with something, whether now or down the road. So
I'll say too, Deb, Pat, anything that you guys would now know about that you didn't 17 years ago, 11 years ago, that you would encourage someone in a position as you were wanting to start your business right out of college, that you didn't know about or that didn't exist then, that you think people should definitely take advantage of?
I mean, there are a lot of places to get help and a lot of resources to explore. And the best and only advice I would give a startup entrepreneur is to keep at it, to be persistent and not to give up, because, first try, second try, third try. If you don't hit it on the head, our first product was a flop. Our first product didn't go anywhere, but we kept at it and we're persistent. And that goes with, meeting people, going to places, and that's how you find talent. That's how you find your business partners, is being persistent and just getting after it. So, it's out there, the opportunity's out there, and it's your job to figure out how to make it happen.
Anything to add, Dev?
I mean, I would say that, there's a lot that you learn, but I think it's probably good that I didn't know what I was in for when I started the company. Otherwise, I might not have done it. So I would tell everyone that, the people in the Lehigh Valley are amazing. We found really great partners in the Valley. We found really great people in the Valley. I'll give a plug. Our attorney, Tim Charlesworth, is here for Fitzpatrick, Lentz, and Buba. We've worked with attorneys all over the country and found their firm to have the same quality work that they can offer. But I mean, just really look at the resources in the Valley. I think that you'll find the quality is there, and that the quality of people is there, and that there's a lot of lessons that you're going to learn along the way. So like Patrick said, just keep with it. That's the most important thing. Don't give up.
Now, Phil, in the time that you work with Computer Aid and how you consult with them now in the leadership team, they have offices all over the world. So, including, I know of one down in Manila, I think there's one in Texas. So there's a lot of different locations. Has there ever been a pull to move Computer Aid from being headquartered in the Valley? Is there a significant reason why they've stayed for so long? Can you give some perspective on that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why they stay in the Lehigh Valley. First, Tony Salvaggio is the founder of Computer Aid back in the early 80s. And he really has a love for the Lehigh Valley. And that's number one. So he's not going to move because of that. And he's had plenty of opportunity to do that. More importantly, I think the culture in the Lehigh Valley, the innovativeness that's here, I think really promotes the reason that computer aid at a headquarters level stays there. I'm a transplanted New Yorker. I've become an Allentonian or a Lehigh Valleyan or whatever you call it. But it's just, everybody's kind of really nice, you know? And being a New Yorker, you become very, cautious. And in a way, I've become less cautious and more trusting of people, where New Yorkers are, they won't even say hello to a policeman. But I mean, if you look around at what Pat was saying, the university structure, the other infrastructure to help companies mature and grow, it's all there. So never say no. Find people. Networking, and I think you mentioned that, is absolutely valuable. It's amazing what you can get done by networking. This whole, the 6 degrees of freedom. It's just, you sit back sometimes, and I know in my career I've sat back and I go, boy, I met someone who introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone else, and things happen. But you can't sit back on your heels. You gotta lean forward. You gotta be on your toes. You gotta keep going. And I think the Lehigh Valley promotes that, and so that's one of the reasons computer aid, stays here at a corporate level.
Dev, what was the hardest part growing at INetU? It certainly wasn't expanding to the neighborhood space.
What was the hardest part of growing INetU? I mean, that's a great question and a hard one to answer. I think the hardest part of growing INetU was continuing to maintain an entrepreneurial culture as you continue to grow a business. So at some point, the business reaches a point where it becomes almost easy to, kind of shortcut the hiring process, or to, when you're really under pressure to make a hire, to compromise when your gut tells you not to add that person. So I think, and I think we've been really fortunate. I think that we've been extraordinarily lucky in having the amazing people that have joined INetU, because it's taken a lot of work to really keep a good, helpful culture of people that are really nice and take really good care of our clients and have the competence to do their job well. And that's been something that's both been hard, but I feel like, I keep coming back to the quality of people issue. So when you invited me on the panel tonight, and you said, what's it like growing a business in the Lehigh Valley? I can't say that enough, that the quality of people really does make a difference, and I feel like that's something that we were really lucky to have.
I'm going to go to a question from Twitter. Technomic Man, I think I said that right. Where's Wayne?
You got it right there.
I did get it right there. Wayne manages the incubator here. He wanted to know, how do you make your biggest decisions? Is there any special techniques, approaches, habits that you formed, just a philosophy of decision making? And let's start with Rita and go down the panel that direction.
I think I want to reiterate what was said about having a great team around you. And so really made sure that we developed a team of people that we can make the big decisions together. So we always make sure that before we do a pivot, whether large or small, or decide to take on an advisor, or decide to go do something like go to Boston for 4 months, that we really sit down as a team and talk through the goods and the bads, and really sort of list them out. And you move at the speed of light, so sometimes I can't say all decisions are made that way. The large decisions are. Sometimes it's just your gut, and a lot of this is just gut and instinct and feeling your way through it as you move through, but also knowing that you've got people that you can bounce ideas off of, and you also have people who have your back, that trust you, that when you make a decision that you haven't consulted on because you didn't have the time, or it just wasn't something in their area of expertise, because when you're a small company, you just don't have everybody. Sometimes you're the only person with that expertise in the company, and you've got to make the call. And having the team that you can rely on to say, okay, you make this call, and I'm just going to go with you 100% because I believe in you, and having other people have that faith in you. So I think that's really sort of how we make our decisions, either if we can as a team, but otherwise it's just being able to have that faith that the people you're with have the right instincts.
Thanks, Phil.
Three things. So one is big decisions have to align with whatever your business strategy is, because it's very easy to go out of scope and you think that an idea is interesting, let's pursue it. Before you know it, you're out of bounds and you're spending money and your overhead starts to rise. Okay, so that's one. The second is what Rita said, is you've got to have a team that understands where your business strategy is, and they can make the operational decisions, because you got to let them do that, because that's the only way you build a good team, or else they're not going to basically follow you. And the third is really learn from your mistakes. Every decision you make is not going to be the right one. At some point, sometimes it's more often than you would like, you've made a bad decision. So if you bring the team together and say, here's what we did, what went wrong, how do we fix it? In my past life, I worked for Sapient. It's a niche consulting company in Boston. And one thing that I really liked about them as a culture of a company is that when we were working on a big project, we would get together and we'd say, what went well today, what didn't go well? And it was never about an individual. It was about the process. What went right? What went wrong? How do we fix it? And you were sort of rewarded if you sort of spoke up and said, hey, I screwed up today. I made a bad decision. Why did I do that? How can we as a team, mitigate that for the project? And then how can I as an individual benefit from that and learn? So those are I think, three big things that I would add.
For those that have used the Agile software development concept, that's a very familiar philosophy. Pat?
That was a great answer. I don't know if I can top that one.
You're only 32. You got another 32 years to catch up to me.
True. No. So I have to agree. I think that big decisions need to be aligned with what your company's philosophy or goals or mission or whatever you want to call it, values, because you need to be able to take a step back, and it's easy to get caught up in excitement of, opportunity. And every opportunity, I have to disagree. I think you shouldn't always say yes. Saying no is sometimes a good thing, depending. And I think that we've had the opportunity to pass up on a lot of possibly decent ideas for the simple statement of we need to focus on what we do very well. And sometimes you need to take a long, hard look and ask yourself what that is, because you can't do everything, and you can't do everything well. We had a 3-year foray into pedicure spas. I had never had a pedicure. Yeah, well, we made product, we sold it. I think we made money a little bit, but at the end, we outsourced that business, and now we just make money in the mail. We get a licensing fee, which is kind of nice, but it wasn't worth the time and effort and distraction from our core market. So those types of questions are really tough. And another point that you made, which is you need to have the buy-in of your team. So yes, ask people their opinions, and yes, find out what consultants could tell you, or your team, or your mother, or your brother. It doesn't matter. Ask a lot of questions, and ultimately, as a business owner, as a business founder, the decision's up to you. And you're the one that has to live with the consequences either way. So you need to trust yourself most of all, not in the sense of I'm right and everybody else is wrong, but this is your call, so you're ultimately responsible for whatever decision that is made. Now, if you have a number of partners, that changes, and you need to come to that decision as a group. Now, as one of three, and we were one of three until last year, so out of 12 years, it's been just three of us. We've always had a majority, and we've always respected the majority's decision on which way to go. So having a deep respect for your partners, if you have one, if you have two partners, that can be very difficult if you disagree, especially if you're like brothers or something. Then it's really tough. So yeah, I think that's all I have.
I think I could probably synthesize your two answers on saying yes or no, and someone that I respect once gave the philosophy that it's not no as much as it's either yes or something better.
Yeah.
So there's sometimes it's not that you're saying no, you're just finding a better solution or a better means of attacking that problem. Deb,
Well, I was going to say, I'm sorry. One more thing. Don't be afraid to challenge people's ideas, right? And so that's what we're good at. We challenge each other every day. And I don't care if you have a bad idea or if you have a good idea, but if somebody's going to challenge me on it, and let the good ideas prevail, because a lot of people are afraid to tell those good ideas to your boss, or, some people scare their employees into not letting them tell the good ideas. So.
Deb?
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of the points made by the group. I think they had a lot of great pieces of advice on making big decisions. So I would absolutely endorse what they said. I would also add, know your blind spots. Know where you're prone to make bad decisions and just put a lot of extra care in those areas. And also just, in addition to knowing your business philosophy, know your priorities, because when it comes to making really big decisions, sometimes being crystal clear on what your priorities are can help you make your way through those decisions.
Deb, we'll stay with you. So for a hosting company, you can obviously have customers that are local, you can have customers that are global. You're storing a web page, it happens to be the internet, it is kind of connected to the rest of the world. As you grew a hosting business in the Lehigh Valley, how important was it to find local clients versus just to find clients around the world? And how does that affect how you run a business in the context of the local community?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we never really had a large number of clients in the local community. I think we were fortunate in that we started in our business fairly early on, and we had the luck of people finding us because they needed what we did. So our business grew largely because of referrals and people finding us. So I would say that we might have had a handful of clients in Pennsylvania. Had clients all over the country and all over the world. One point we had a map in our office, and it was really fascinating to see that we were, insourcing IT work into America at a time when most companies were outsourcing IT work. So being here, and just I think because of our circumstance, really contributed to kind of how we grew. That being said, we do now have salespeople, and they do work with some local companies, and we work with local partners, and that's been great, and that's been very successful.
Now, Phil, I know, so the Valley has a history of manufacturing, a history of making physical goods, from Bethlehem Steel to Mack Truck. Air Products is not something necessarily you touch, but is still a physical good. All of those companies, though, are really technology companies, right? You work with CIOs, and I think you have the philosophy, or I know it is a philosophy, that we really are all, at some extent, a technology company, regardless of what our product is.
Yeah. So in speaking to the 150 CIOs and IT business executives, it became really, really clear that every company, no matter what it is, how big or how small, is really a technology company. And I'll give you an example. So there's a insurance company out in California called CSAA Insurance, and its market is really the AAA club members. And they sell insurance across, I think, 30 or 35 states. But their market is only AAA. That's the way they're founded, and that's the way their charter is. So they sell insurance. They had an IT organization that was wasn't really providing good services to the rest of the company, tactical. They brought in a CIO who's really a strategic thinker and is really taking that company from just providing insurance products to providing a host of services that support the insurance products that really, in a lot of cases, become more valuable than the product itself. And he's convinced the board that the company is really a technology company, not a product company. And when you have that philosophy, then you start thinking about ways in which to expand your revenue base by developing a whole host of services. So we're really in a service economy. It's what I call, we went from a push to a pull to a personalized model. It's all demand-based. Everybody's got their iPhone, and consumers are demanding more services. So it's all about technology. And so what I was mentioning to Tim earlier is that philosophy really helps companies no matter where they are, and in this case, the Lehigh Valley. It's not the Lehigh Valley market, it's the global market, right? And so where products used to be physical, like when I was a kid, it was either Cheerios or Kellogg's Corn Flakes, right? Now everything, it's all services, and it's all about technology. So the only closing thought I would, to answer that is, so Fred Smith, who founded FedEx, so early on, he realized his philosophy was that the information about the product is going to be more valuable than the product, which is shipping a product. And that really helped drive FedEx from starting to deliver 24-hour shipments across 5 or 6 states to the global company that it is today. It was thinking that and realizing that they were a technology company.
So would you say there's probably, with the characteristics of the Valley, would you see there to be a lot of perhaps untapped potential for product companies in the Valley to then embrace the idea that, hey, we can innovate a lot more by putting more technology behind what we're doing, by becoming better, by offering more services, and really rethinking some of the characteristics of business in the Lehigh Valley area?
So I don't, B. Braun, I just know as a medical company in the Lehigh Valley. I do not know anything more about them. I did not get an opportunity to interview the CIO there. But I'll give you an example of Harry Lukens, Lehigh Valley Healthcare. Okay, Lehigh Valley Hospital Network, I guess is. So he's been there for about 35 years. And if anybody's had the misfortune of being in an intensive care unit, and I was when I had a bad case of pneumonia, that the care you get in the morning during the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift is different than the care you get from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Because all the good doctors are home with their families, or at least the ones that have been practicing for a while. And in the evening, they're basically staff, with the residents and the interns and the new physicians. What they came up with about 10 years ago was what they called the advanced ICU. So they developed, and this is where technology plays in. So what could we do to extend the services of healthcare to patients in the ICU unit in the evening, where they get the same level of care as they did during the day, but they don't have the medical care support. So they started an advanced ICU unit, off-site facility. They called it Doc in the Box. And in that facility, all of the 400 ICU beds were connected electronically through a network. And if you go in the room, and I was in there, there's 3 nurses, a panel of displays, and they monitor all of the 400 ICU beds, and they have access technologically to all the medical records. And then there's a intensivist, is what they call it. So this is a physician who is certified in intensive care, pulmonology, I guess that's right, and critical care. And they can monitor all the patients and give them the same care in the evening as they do during the day. And so that's an example of where you leverage technology from a service perspective. And statistically, they came up with they save about 100 lives a year because they're able to do that. So just thinking of what your products are, the simple way is look at the products that you offer, look at your customer base, do a herringbone diagram and look at your customer base and say, what do my customers do with the products that we supply? And go through the various connections through their network. And you'd be amazed to come up to identify a set of services that can complement your product that could really add value.
All right, I'm just going to make a brief technical note. We've lost some things with the stream, so Frank, you're going to have to pan around for a little bit. Rita, on the same idea of untapped potential in the Valley, is there, with all the resources that you found, do you think there's still things you don't know about? Is perhaps part of the difficulty with the Valley, the fact that there is resources, individuals, people that even now that you've been doing this for 2 years, you don't know yet? And what can be done to make that better?
I don't know what I don't know.
Well, you continue to find
No,
more
but yeah,
as
no,
you
I
go
would
on.
say that there's always something new, and we're always finding some new resource, some, whether it's some new grant that we could possibly apply for, or some new person, or a new introduction, or even this evening in the conversation at this panel, there was another, possible connection introduction that you can make. So I don't think you ever fully tap into the resources of an area, and to make the mistake that we think that the Lehigh Valley is not New York or Philadelphia, which is, I think, one of the problems is being so close to such large, being so close to New York City and Philadelphia, it's very easy to see yourself as small comparatively. But if you took away those two cities or pushed them further away, I think that you would start to recognize just how much there is in the Valley in terms of, the universities that are here, the resources that are here, the professionals that are here, the businesses that are here. I'm always surprised every day to learn of something else that's headquartered in Lehigh Valley, or some, there is ed tech even in Lehigh Valley. Initially it was like there is none, but there are quite a few ed tech companies that are, SunGard is one of them. It's in the Lehigh Valley. It's pretty big. And so this idea, I think that there's always more resources that can be tapped. I mean, even coming to events like this, every time, I've been coming about 2 years now, and I see a new face in the audience, at least one new face, sometimes a lot more every night. So each one of those faces is a new resource for you. So.
We have another question from Twitter. Bill wants to know, Bill Spain, at what point in each of you, and I don't know if Rita, if you've reached this point yet, did you start considering yourselves not a startup? And then I guess for Phil, like if you can give us just some insight on when you would stop seeing a company as a consultant, as a startup. So Rita, kick it off, and we'll just go down the table with that.
We are a startup.
Yes,
I'm not sure.
Would you think that the transition would happen then?
I'm not sure, because I've asked myself that a lot, because I talk to some companies that have been in business for several years, and they're profitable and they have large revenues, and they still call themselves a startup. So I think sometimes startup is defined by by revenues or by scope, but sometimes it's also defined, like you said, about how you handle the business, how you see the business. So keeping that startup culture, I think sometimes companies will continue to define themselves as a startup for years after other people looking from the outside in don't see them as a startup. So I'm not sure when I would ever get to the point. We're still clearly in that startup phase, and I'm happy to be in it still. So I don't know. Call me back in a couple years and I'll tell you when it happens.
All right, Phil, any thoughts on that question as it pertains to these companies that are growing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my answer is going to be a little different. My answer is going to be, if you stop thinking of yourself as a startup, you will fail. And the reason I say that is, in today's global economy, the dynamics of the marketplace are so great that you have to always innovate. You've always got to create new products, new services. Some fail, you learn from that. So if you stop thinking of yourself as a startup, that's the wrong way to think about it, in my opinion. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it, just from a personal experience, in working with a startup, the camaraderie between the employees in a small startup, there are no politics in that kind of organization. Everybody is focused on one thing, making that startup successful. The hard part is, as a company grows, how do you keep that culture going? The worst part, and I'm sure we can all have terrific conversations about companies we work for and all the politics that really constrain the growth of a company and the ability to work together effectively as a team, and that just constrains a company's growth. So the hard part, Jack Welch said, how do you take the agility and speed and creativity of a startup and instill that in a growing company? If you can do that, you'll be very successful.
All right, Pat, Do you still consider yourself a startup?
I would probably say we've gone through a startup to becoming more of a mature company to back to a startup. I think we're back in a place where we're doing a lot of the things that helped us to be successful in the beginning. And sometimes as your company grows, you can lose sight of that, and you end up with people and process that stifles some of the creativity and agility and ability to think creatively, and no company can afford to do that these days. And part of the reason is, just as Phil said, if you're not innovating and creating something new, if you're not growing, you're dying. And the fact of the matter is you can't depend on whatever it is that you do, whether it's an app or whether it's a service. There's 100 other people out there trying to do the same thing, and there's going to be another 57 that are going to do it in 3 weeks. So you need to continue to be in a mode where the values of innovation, the values of, keeping costs down, and the values of doing it dirt cheap they never grow old. So.
Now, Deb, I would assume INetU you wouldn't consider a startup anymore.
So I mean, I agree 200% with what Phil said in that you always have to keep thinking like a startup. We keep it simple. We have 3 values, and one of them is entrepreneurial for that exact reason. I spoke recently on phases of companies' growth. So this was actually a question about when you stop being a startup that I actually reflected on quite a bit to give that speech. And so I'll give you the technical answer, but then tell you in my heart when it didn't feel like a startup. So the technical answer I shared with that audience is a startup is a company. It's a temporary company in search of a business model. So, that was my definition, that you're no longer a startup once you have a business model that works and you can grow it. And that's when I think technically, if I had to draw a line, I would draw the line. Startups, we spent years tinkering with I don't even want to say tinkering, really rewriting our business model. It took a couple of years. Once we had a business model, and it's been, there's been changes in strategy, but it's largely been an intact business model. So that's when I think we were no longer a startup. But in my heart, when it stopped feeling like a startup is when, when sort of people decisions get made that I as a founder don't agree with, but you realize as you're installing levels of management and process that decisions are going to have outcomes that aren't ones that I think I would have made. And that for me was when I sort of looked at the business and said, okay, it's got a life of its own.
Right, Pat, one question for you. If as you grow Ecotech, if there's one thing that you could bring to the Valley, especially now that you've seen other places, like your other location in Iowa, if there was one thing, the people, technology, atmosphere, whatever, if there was one thing you could bring to the Valley, what would it be?
That's a good one. That's a good question.
And certainly Deb, Rita, Phil, any thoughts on that as well? Yeah. If there's one thing from another thriving community, from another place, you could just transplant right here. What would it be?
Want me to answer?
Yeah, go. You go first.
Well, so in my experience, in my association with Computer Aid, I think it's innovativeness and entrepreneurship. And because Computer Aid runs an entrepreneurial type of company, and it's kind of interesting. It's a rather large company. It's 4,000 employees. It's $600 million. It's all over the world, and people they don't not contradict one another, but people debate. So you have this open culture. It's not a dictatorial type of organization that, in a lot of corporations you have to have specific processes and that. But it's very entrepreneurial. People have some interesting ideas, and they get pursued, and they try to make a business out of it, and it fits into the corporate scheme. So I think it's for me, I think it's innovativeness, and I think any community that fosters that kind of culture is a good one. There's a really great book that I recommend everybody to read. It's called The Startup Nation, and it's about how have you ever read that?
Great book.
Great book.
About Israel.
It talks about Israel. It talks about a small country with an innovative culture, and what are the aspects? What's the composition of the culture, and why, on a per capita basis, do they have more inventions than other countries, even the U.S.? It's fascinating, and one of the things is this open debate. I mean, two examples. One, Intel had they had a division over in Israel, and I don't know which chip it was, 1088 or one of the early chips, and the Israeli startup or division wanted to. They had a design that Intel didn't want to use, and they didn't take no for an answer because they knew they were right, and they just kept traveling over here and talking to Intel out in California, and they were right. So it's that kind of culture, and even in the military, where everybody in the States, it's a very command and control. So in the military, you sort of like, you don't like your lieutenant, you vote him out. That's kind of interesting. But if you and then what they did is they developed a culture, since everybody serves in the military and the university structure, they have this network that they leverage, and they just have these great ideas and they just start up. So it's interesting when you look at it and you say, what makes up an innovative culture in an organization? That's a great book. You ready for your answer?
So I'm really coming up with nothing here. I think that from my perspective, we've been able to find people.
The LVTech would love that. There's
People.
nothing that you can bring to the Valley. They'd love that answer, I'm sure.
So I've found innovative people here. I've found resources from the standpoint of, people who understand technology, people who understand manufacturing. If it's not here, for example, we're a company that deals with suppliers around the globe, it doesn't matter. And whether it's software, I can get help here and I can get help elsewhere. So from my perspective, Lehigh Valley is a great place to have a business.
Rita, yeah.
I think the one thing that I think would improve the culture of the Valley in terms of innovation is there's a great on-campus community, particularly Lehigh, the Lehigh students. And then there seems to be sort of an older community of entrepreneurs, and there seems to be this missing group between graduate school and 40, 35, I don't know, that sees staying in the Lehigh Valley is not the place to make it, to be innovative. And I've seen an awful lot of people come through in the last 2 years through the meetups and move out to California for a couple of years to feel like in order to make it, they have to go to San Francisco, or they have to go to Philly, or they have to go to New York in order to really get that opportunity to spread your wings and do something new. And then a lot of times they come back to the Valley because they start seeing that there really are things here. And so for me, I live in the city of Allentown, and things like what's going on downtown in Allentown, and seeing that sort of revitalization and hoping that it drives because it's not just about entrepreneurship, it's also about a place where people want to live and a place where people want to hang out and meet other people and drive that whole community. And I think it's unfortunate that there's a lot of thought that you have to go to these other cities around us. And I think that's one key thing, that maybe if there was a bit of an improvement there, we could have a more, an even larger community than we already have, an even more robust community. Because you can find people, you certainly can. And if you look, it's amazing the people that you find here. But I think we feel like there's hidden pockets instead of a large flourishing community. We shouldn't have to search to find each other. It should just be more obvious that we're all here. So I think that could be really helpful.
Certainly, if you're looking for a large, flourishing community of technology enthusiasts in the Valley, you could always come here to our meetup. Dev, any thoughts on that? One thing that you could take, I know you echoed Phil's perspective on entrepreneurship and the book about, what was it? Yeah, Startup Nation. Anything specifically that you bring to the Valley?
I'd like to see there be like just more activities for like a younger professional group. I think we could do a better job in terms of having the kinds of lifestyle that, you know, yeah, I know, and you know, there's definitely progress. So if you look at things like the new stadiums or some of the restaurants, I mean, those things are going in the right direction. But it would be great to have more like nightlife and kind of cultural kind of stuff. That'll help keep some of the people here that you mentioned might want to look elsewhere.
All right, now we're going to wrap up in just a second. I want to see if there's any, I'll check the Twitter feed that I have been kind of ignoring. Is there any questions that someone wasn't able to ask on Twitter feed in the room that you have? Not all at once now. Yes. All right, so I'll repeat the question so the internet can hear. How did you get the finances to start your business? Let's take Rita for that one, because you're the newest right now.
Sure. So we don't have them all yet, but we started just by bootstrapping and by finding people who are willing to work for nothing, for equity. That's not nothing. It's for equity. For example, our developer. I had an idea, and I didn't know how to code it, so I found somebody who was inspired by the idea and willing to do that. And then from there, it's just making connections. We got grants. We applied here at Ben Franklin and got funding through Ben Franklin, and so just and our own personal savings. And it's just a matter of cobbling it together from every place you can and figuring out how to be lean and spend wisely with the resources that you have, and to use people as wisely as you can, and reach out to friends and family who might be willing to donate some small resources that they have to really help you get going. So it's find people first, because the most valuable thing people have is their time, and then the second thing you look for is money. So.
Do you have
How old is that person who asked the question? How old are you?
12.
And
Are
what
you-
business are you in?
Yeah, what business?
Are you starting a business?
Researching how to start a business.
Maybe get some competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to tell them.
So there was a young gentleman who was an intern. His name was Sam Wang, and Sam Wang was a student, and I think he went to high school down south of here. And somehow he found out about us and was a Reef Aquarist. And this guy, he was really into computers and really into computer games, and he played like StarCraft 2 and like these other games. And he had a bunch of friends that were like really good at video games. And so he started a business while he was in high school, like 3 times, right? The first one didn't work, the second one didn't work. And now I think he drives like an Audi R8, and I think he has like he lives out in California and has like a Bentley, I don't know. He made a lot of money, but he didn't even need any money to start a business. The best way to get money is to start a business is to learn a skill. So learn to do something, be passionate about it, and then build something, whether it's software or make a product. And you can find people or ways to get the money together if you can create something that's unique and adds value.
I'll go to Dev for this one, just because we have such a kind of a variety of companies. We have a software product, we have a physical product with Ecotech, we have a service with Computer, which is kind of a mix of a bunch of different things, either consulting versus service hosting, a little bit of everything. From your experience, is there a big difference between how you would start a product-based startup versus a service-based startup versus something else? The one question we had from Twitter was versus an investment firm, but just when you look across the board at the different types of companies, do you think there's a big difference in the early stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think service companies and product companies are probably quite different. I now can understand the difference. I'm not sure I could have when I started, but I think a product company is probably more capital intensive. So I think, there's definitely a need in that you can't do much until you can actually have the equipment to build a product. Where a service company, I mean, I didn't raise any angel funding until INetU was 2 or 3 years old. So I actually had services in my business which I never intended to keep permanently, but they were things that people would buy and would be $100-$200 transactions that were easy to do and something that no one else was doing, and it was a service we provided for a couple of years, which provided cash flow to make those biweekly payrolls. And I mean, that was my biggest stressor was every 2 weeks, how am I going to actually cut paychecks and going to cut rent? When it came time to raise angel money, I got my father to help me write a business plan, and we made a special deal with angel investors, which I feel helped me a ton. Was I signed a special side agreement that if the business went bankrupt, that they would be entitled to 100% recovery of their money before I would get a penny out of the business. And that was a side agreement that expired in 5 years. So 5 years after they made the investment, if the company was still solvent, that agreement would evaporate. But, that commitment of telling people that I'll make sure you get every penny back before I get a penny, let people know that I was really willing to make a sacrifice and walk out penniless to preserve their investment. But I think as you start different kinds of businesses, you're absolutely going to have very different strategies about how to form them. I mean, I don't know, but I would imagine you almost have to have money to start a product company. I don't know if that's true.
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on your product. And it depends on, so if you're going to build something, and I'll just give you the example of building two examples. One is the first thing my partners made before I was involved was called a Kalkwasser reactor, which was an acrylic tube with a magnetic stir bar in the bottom, and it spun a liquid with some powder in it, calcium hydroxide, and then that was used in conjunction with a dosing pump to put water inside of an aquarium. To build that, you just need to buy the acrylic and have the machines to. So yes, you need some money. You need $5,000 in materials. But to actually make a product like an iPhone or a pump or even a plastic toy, it's going to require an upfront investment of money to tool for advanced manufacturing, like injection molding. So yes, that requires in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $20,000. Now, we did it without having to do. We bootstrapped it. We never took money from an investor. We still haven't today, and we've essentially taken what we had, which was a prototype. And you don't need money to make a prototype. You can go to your local school with a 3D drawing, and they'll make it for you. Boom, simple as that. Now you take that prototype, which is what we did, and you go to a bank or you go to a customer first and say, hey, I want to make this for you, and will you buy it? And if they say yes, then you take a purchase order from that customer and go to the bank and say, Joe Schmo wants to buy 10,000 of these. Will you give me the money to fund my production run? In our case, they said, okay, we'll give you $100,000. It's SBA backed, which means the Small Business Association is going to tell the bank, we'll guarantee 90% of the funds that you lend to a small business. So, in essence, we were able to not have to do anything but borrow money and pay interest on it and manufacture something.
Any other questions from the room that didn't make Twitter? Santiago. All right, I'll repeat the question. There's been effort from the local level to encourage the retention of college graduates. As business owners, founders, working closely with technology business in the Valley, have you seen the fruits of that effect? in any meaningful way. Phil?
So from the experience at Computer Aid, that's the one I'll give you. So Computer Aid hires a lot of interns from universities. And there's probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 of them that are spread across a couple of campuses. And what's interesting is it's a win-win. It's a win for the company in that if the intern seems to have some good talent, creative, and they want a career, they can stay in the Valley. If they don't feel they fit in, they'll either find another, they'll continue their education and go off somewhere else. But there are a lot of the interns that Computer Aid retains. So if that word spreads around, that's just, it's in a sense a little magnetism to keep some of the university students in the Lehigh Valley. Okay. On the culturally, I've got a lot of friends that have kids get out of school. They want to go to New York. Parents have to fund the apartment in New York. They want to go out to California. People want to spread their wings. And so that's a cultural thing that I think is hard to change because it's a natural evolution of the generation. But the only way you're going to retain the talent in the Lehigh Valley from the college graduates or the undergraduates is basically to have a process or an internship program to get them involved. You don't want to wait till they graduate because a lot of them may leave school in their junior year and start their own business somewhere.
That's true. Pat or Deb, are you seeing effects from kind of the push to keep students interested in the area?
I would say most recently, some of the programs that would benefit the reverse brain drain have kind of disappeared in the Lehigh Valley. We've hired a lot of interns that have become key employees, and I have to agree that if there's one way that a city or a municipality can help do that is to help fund or do the connection for these things, because it does keep people here. And maybe it's not the startup companies, but people who will contribute to the economy and help companies grow. And yes, maybe it might inspire someone to go ahead and build a business. But connecting the students to the businesses, the earlier that can happen in a person's education to get that experience, the better.
Yeah.
So I'll add, I think I see positive trends taking place, but as a business owner, I'm not aware of anything that the municipalities have done that have helped. I think there's other forces that are probably doing some positive things for the area which are helping, but I'm not aware of anything that the local governments have done that has helped.
And I think the other thing we want me to note, just there's been a lot of answers surrounding reaching out to younger generations and all that at the startup weekend this weekend, the youngest participant, I believe, was 14. So we are trying to capture them young, so even younger than what could be able to work in an internship, I hope, right? A couple quick questions, because we're wrapping up here. Just so give me 1-2 sentence answer. We had Nick Hance wanted to know some hiring advice. Do you follow the principle of hire slowly, fire fast? Dev, any comments, any thoughts on hiring advice?
I think hiring is a process worth investing in. I think having great people makes all the difference. So many times when we're busy, we're under pressure to hire quick to get jobs filled, and I think that's probably the wrong idea. I would say that we have a fairly comprehensive hiring process. A candidate might interview with actually several departments, even ones they're not working with, and they might interview with somewhere between 3 and 6 different people in multiple rounds. And I believe having the longer process to really vet candidates is something that I think is a wonderful thing.
Pat, any tips?
Hire quickly, fire fast. Is that like a thing?
I don't know.
It is, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Think about some things now.
Well, okay. So I just started using this website called Workable. I thought that was a really cool way to hire people. It's very streamlined. Check it out. It's an online platform. Those things are great. So hiring is really tough, man. I mean, you can do 7 interviews. You can rake them over the coals. You can do background checks. It doesn't mean that it's going to be an effective employee. And the hardest thing is to stick with somebody that's not working, which we've done, and stick it out, and that sucks. So I don't really have any good advice.
So the advice is it's really tough. Phil.
So I learned early in my career when I was in manufacturing that you don't hire based on skill. You can teach someone to do a job. Okay, what you do is you hire based on personality traits. We've all heard about it's important to have a good team. So team building, communication, creativity, innovation, the way people think, are they able to communicate well, I think are really, really core and are really, really important. Other than, you're going to be a surgeon, you need to have a skill. But in other positions, if they have some core skills, and you can and if you've got to hire based on the skill, make sure that they have those other traits. But I think those other traits are more important, because else you end up with an employee who may have a great skill, but can't team well, gets angry, doesn't show up on time, and then you end up with a situation where I don't have a productive employee. What do I do? You want to stretch it out, and that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work. So I think you need to, the advice is think about some of those other core skills in terms of creativity, teaming, leadership, vision, et cetera, as something that's really important in the hiring process.
And Rita, you've had success so far. Is it more than the 3 of you?
Well, we have an intern as well, so
Sure.
we do, and he's awesome. I think in our case, I even think about how we met our CTO, and although that wasn't a hiring, it sort of was, because there were 2 of us who had the idea, and we brought in a third partner, and we spent the 54 hours at Startup Weekend with them, and it was sort of an extended interview of whether or not we wanted to work with this person, and very high pressure situation. And for us, it was about, personality. We knew we had the skills. There's a lot of iOS developers who have the skills to build our app. But you also need somebody who has the passion, shares your vision, you can get along with, you can live for 4 months in a 150 square foot apartment with. So that'll teach you a lot about the people that you're partners with, and also tell you that you've really picked the right person. And then we took that idea when we did our first hire, and the same thing, we saw a resume that had skills. He showed us that he could code. Those are really easy things to figure out, whether or not they can do that. But then it's figuring out, are they the right fit for your company? And I think that really is the most important thing. I mean, you have to have skills. You can't have somebody who doesn't have skills. But you have to have somebody who you can work with every day. And especially when you're a real small company, and most of the time there's 3 of us in the office, sometimes 4 of us in the office. Once again, even in I think it's meant for 2 people, so there's 4 of us jammed in there. And being able to work together and collaborate, and being able to challenge, that's one of the favorite things that I love, is that having people who feel comfortable challenging your ideas, even though you founded the company and they're an employee. There's 3 of us sitting in the office, and at this point, the concept between employee and founder sometimes gets blurred when you're trying to figure out the best way to move forward in your product development. They might have a much better idea than you do at that particular moment, and it is then all about personality. So I would hope we're 2 for 2 now between our intern and our full-time hire. So hopefully we can, whatever we've been doing, it continues to work well for us.
All right, 2 more questions before we wrap up, and just give me quick answers, because I think we're nearing the end of our time limit here. If there was one thing, as you look at what you've done so far, if there was one thing, starting, growing, wherever, one thing that you could do over and change, what would it be? We'll start with Rita and go down the table. I know I started with you.
That was a hard one, and that takes time to think of. One thing that we could change if we could start over.
They have to think these are like years.
I know.
You only have 2 years to go back through.
I know, but we don't know whether we messed up yet or not sometimes. We haven't gotten to that point. I think one thing that we could change is maybe starting some process things a little bit earlier. So Matt and I now have a really good routine, particularly we've developed that, we work on the Agile methodology in terms of our regular meetings and our daily stand-ups and those sorts of things. And at first we kind of let that go because we were like, oh, it's just 2 of us and we can just chat back and forth. And when you get too casual, there's this balance in a startup between we're casual and we can chat back and forth all day long. And there actually has to be some point where we write down whatever it was we were talking about and decide on a focus, and this is where we're going. And so I think the one thing I could change if it would be to have started a little bit of that process sooner.
So added some of that structure even early on when it's just 2 people.
When it's just 2 people, because it's very easy with 2 people to just lose the structure.
Phil, looking back over different positions, different companies, or even if you can bring it specifically to something you saw at Computer Aid, your time there, one thing that you could do over, you think it would turn out better?
Well, with gray hair on my head, you can imagine there's a whole list of things. But what pops up in my mind, just generally in terms of the career, is if I had to do something over again, I would have, earlier on in my career, I would have listened more, number one. When you're young, you think you know everything. Number 2, in terms of just managing groups of people, is really foster debate and communication, because I think that helps build the team. So those are the 2 things that pop up in my mind.
All right, Pat. What one thing, if you could, would you have changed now looking back?
Can I have 2 things?
Okay.
So there were times when I shouldn't have listened to people, where, the owners should have trusted our more baser instincts. So that's a very nebulous answer, but that's one thing. And I would also like to go back and give myself a crystal ball that can tell the future. That's what I would change.
It's got to be tough to figure out what's you not knowing what you're doing and what someone else telling you what didn't work before, because you're trying to do something.
I want a product forecast genie. Can you make that?
Product forecast genie.
Yeah.
Maybe the next hackathon. Deb, anything as you look back that you would change now?
Can I get 2 answers too?
Sure.
All right. So the first.
Take the crystal ball.
Well, that's a given. So I would say, if I could go back, there were a few times when we had some people that we just knew in our gut were not the right people to have, and I just wish that we acted on it sooner, because we were young, I was young, and literally took years to sort those problems out, and I think would have been much better. I mean, we knew that we had a problem and just didn't act soon enough. The second thing is I would have probably capitalized the business with more money. I think I feel good about our strategy and our opportunity. But, there was an adage that people told you that the advantage goes to the first mover. And I don't think that that's correct today. I think today the advantage goes to first the scale. And I feel like I capitalized the business like 1/10 or 1/50th for the opportunity that we had in cloud computing. And that, if I could go back, I would have been much more aggressive in capitalizing the company.
So perhaps I could paraphrase, you're saying at first tackle those hard problems even if they seem hard, don't put them off, and then go big or go home. Is that kind of it? All right. And one more question. I'll start with you again, Dev, and we'll move down the panel. What in the Valley that makes you most excited to be here? And that's going to be our last question for the evening.
I mean, will you be mad if I keep going back to the quality of people? Because
if that's our strong point, I think it's worth talking.
No, I mean, I can't overstate that enough. In that I have friends who have tech companies around the country and around the world, and there's times I'm jealous that they're in San Francisco and they've got the super specialized talented people, but their people stay for a year and they're never really committed to be part of the company. And just the character and the loyalty and integrity of people in the Lehigh Valley makes, in my opinion, the people here among the best to have be part of your business.
Pat, what makes you most excited to be having Ecotech here still in the Valley?
Well, and when I graduated college, I always thought I'd go out to California or New York or something crazy like that. But no, I'm from St. Louis, and we stayed here in the Lehigh Valley, and it's grown on me tremendously. I believe that the Lehigh Valley not only has good people, but a very diverse group of people. You know, we've got people that are good assembly workers. We've got people that are good in IT, and it's a broad spectrum of talents and of skills that also contributes to that solid base. And there's a lot of benefits with that. You know, we're a mid-sized city, and you know, not the most expensive area. There's just a lot of good things.
All right, Phil.
So the unofficial answer is my grandchildren live here, and they're not moving anywhere, so we're not moving anywhere. But if I put my computer aid hat on, I think it's the familial culture in the Lehigh Valley, and the innovativeness and camaraderie. If you take a look at the employee base in computer aid and look at the tenure, it's pretty large, pretty long, and a lot of people, a lot of consultants will say you got to be careful when you have, a culture where people have been around for 20, 30 years, because it just doesn't foster innovation. But if you have innovation and people hang around, they work together really well. So that's what I see at Computer Aid. There's a lot of people that I've known who have been there since 1990 when I first started. I've been with Computer Aid a couple of times before I went out on my own. So familial culture and innovation. I think that's what really keeps people here.
All right, and Rita, as you grow a company, have an app in the App Store, have teachers using it, have teachers loving it, as you continue to build that, what makes you excited to have the company here in the Lehigh Valley?
I moved to Lehigh Valley about 7 years ago. I grew up north of here and then went to college south of here and just sort of ended up in this middle spot. And I'll be honest, at first I wasn't thrilled about the fact that this is where we ended up, just because it was so close to home and everybody has that idea of spreading your wings. But getting to know the people in the Lehigh Valley and what we have here, and then watching it grow out of, even over the last 7 years from, you hate to mention Billy Joel, but it's everywhere we go, that's what we get. And really telling people that's not what it is, and really seeing things get better in the Lehigh Valley, and seeing things get better, not just business-wise, because where you make your business and how you attract good people to work for you is also being somewhere where people want to live, and where people want to spend their time when they're not at work, because that's important as well, where they can go out and they can meet other people who've got interesting jobs, and really seeing so much of that growth in terms of the restaurants in the area, and not feeling the draw so much anymore of having to get in my car and drive an hour in order to go hang out with other people who are like-minded and who want to go out and have a great meal. There's all of that here in the Lehigh Valley, and showcasing that to people. I think that's sort of what gets me excited. The time we spent in Boston, I kept telling people, I'm not from Philly, we're from this place called the Lehigh Valley, so.
Yeah, I have to tell people that I work for a global company, and they always just assume, you're in the East Coast, it's either Philly or New York. So let's give our guests a round of applause for a wonderful meetup tonight. And I'd like to say, if you've enjoyed this, definitely, I don't know if you're on Twitter. If you are on Twitter, follow @LVTech if you want to find out more about what we're doing. Join the meetup if you have not joined the meetup and somehow you just stumbled across this room and you're like, well, that looks interesting, I should stop in. Definitely find us on meetup.com and see what we have going on. I want to say thanks for putting up with us as we try new stuff like the live stream tonight that didn't quite work out the way that we wanted, but hopefully if you're listening online, you've enjoyed that as well. If you were here and you think this is something that people should benefit from, or if you know someone who you think would have enjoyed the discussion tonight, definitely go. We will tweet out the links again, and I'll post them in the meetup comments. Go to the channel, share the video. It should be online pretty soon, and just share it with your network, because there's a ton of people I think in the Valley that don't know that we're doing things like this, and we'd love to have them involved. On that note, I would say if you've enjoyed this meetup, make sure you come to the next one next month. It's going to be our kind of what I call a lightning bar, which is a mix of a bar camp and lightning talks. So we're going to just have a sign-up sheet when you walk in, and you can sign up for a 5 or 10 minute slot to just talk about whatever you are passionate about. And it's a great opportunity to share what you're doing and to find out what other people are doing in the Lehigh Valley area. So come out to that. It's kind of our holiday party thing. So we had some light refreshments tonight. We'll have a more of a spread in December. That's generally what we do. And there's going to have the open mic we'll have in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to attempt to reach over here and cut the live stream. So we won't have that on the live stream. But thank you for coming. And if you're watching online, thank you for watching. And I'm going to turn you off.